So today I'm super excited to have Nick and Hanna True on the show today. They are a 20-something couple who lives in an Airstream with their four adorable little fur babies. Nick used to be an engineer and Hanna was a physical therapist. But in kind of getting on the same page with their finances and figuring it out, they've leveraged that to really start to live their best life now. So they are in a 27-foot Airstream. They travel around the country. They have more time with their family. And they've been able to make career transitions as well to be able to do more things around personal finance and public speaking. Hannah really enjoys design and crafting and everything pets. And I just love how through being intentional with their money, they've leveraged this into so many things and are now creating just really concise, thoughtful content in the personal finance space. I am happy to call them dear friends. We've got to hang out in person many times, so I'm super excited to share these lovely human beings with all of you. Nick and Hannah, welcome to the show.
Thank you. We're so excited to be here.
Yeah, we're super happy to be here.
So to get started, one of the things that I think is really interesting about your story, because it's so common for most of us, is that you came into this marriage with somewhat different mindsets and philosophies about your personal finances. So for each of you, I guess, what was that like growing up? Like, how did you see your parents using money? What did you kind of internalize as to like, this is how money works in the world?
Well, in my family, I was super blessed to grow up listening to Dave Ramsey all the time. So whenever we were in the car, Dave Ramsey was on the radio. And so I saw my parents making wise financial decisions, but it also wasn't like the main focus of the household, I guess. So it was a given that they didn't take out loans for a car. They didn't carry credit card debt. They paid things off. And I knew that, but we also didn't spend a lot of time talking about it. So that was one of those things that, you almost grew up with as a value without even realizing it. And then I kind of got into the real world and recognized that not everybody had grown up that way and viewed money that way. So,
do you think that that kind of influenced how did that combined with kind of just your natural money personality?
The way I feel like that kind of played into my life as I got older is I always enjoyed shopping and spending, and I like doing that a little bit more spontaneously. It was always within reason. I wasn't somebody who was going to go out and take out loans for a car or anything like that. But I did like being able to go to TJ Maxx and, spend $50 to $100 without thinking too much about it. And I definitely brought that into mine and Nick's marriage. And my parents had overall made really good money decisions, but also hadn't made budgeting a huge focus. So there was never like, okay, this month we have $50 to spend on clothing and that's all we're going to spend and then we're going to be done. So when Nick and I got married and that was kind of how he was wanting to tackle things, that was totally new for me and definitely led to a few not our best marriage days. That's what I'll say. It led to not our best marriage days.
That's a good way to say it. That's a fun way to say it.
So it sounds like you had good money boundaries. Like,
yes,
we don't go into debt, but there were no there was no micromanaging of the money. Like, as long as we don't spend too much, we just really have a lot of fun with it. And
yes,
totally.
Kind of the anti-budgeting method, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a totally fair approach.
And Nick, what was it like for you?
Yeah. So my family, funny enough, I guess, didn't actually put a big emphasis on budgeting either necessarily. In my family, we talked a lot about hard work and how hard work could lead to making money, and then that money could lead to you sort of living a life that you wanted. My dad owned his own business, and so I had a lot of conversations around that growing up, which has been really huge for our careers and also for our finances because we sort of came in and I had all this like hard work mentality kind of instilled in me. My parents did also talk about not going into debt and we went through a Crown Financial thing when I was like in middle school, which was really great. But my parents were also not big budgeters and never really talked about sort of investing or the long-term stuff. I guess I got a combination of luck and personality type where all that hard work kind of conversation eventually led me in late high school to really start reading a lot of personal finance blogs and books, and then that's where I started getting the sort of the really intense budgeting focus that I kind of brought into the marriage.
My very first personal finance book was by Crown Financial, a
Are you
very
serious?
simple budgeting book by Larry Burkett.
Yep.
Um, very first personal finance book I ever bought.
There you go. There you go. Good old Larry.
So you guys come into this relationship both with very different money personalities, spending styles, how you like to organize your finances. What was it like trying to combine that into one spending plan?
So I think that the biggest difference between us was I sort of had this very long term approach, and Hannah had sort of the boundaries like you just talked about. And then after that, it was like, hey, let's try and maximize what we're doing now in the moment. And this sort of came to a head, I think, when Hannah was doing a physical therapy rotation in Columbus, Ohio, and I was still working in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And she was away for 8 weeks. And we, were still trying to somewhat budget. And so what was happening is Hannah would go out and buy things. And a lot of times it was stuff she needed. She needs groceries. She's got to eat. She's got to buy things. She has to get clothes for her new setup. And then, I had text messages when our credit cards got swiped so that I could enter it into my Quicken. And so I'd be texting her like, hey, what are you buying at this place? Why are you not sticking to the budget?
And the precursor here is that we were using Quicken, and so our budget was only on Nick's computer.
Which you brought to, you were like, well, listen,
I don't even know what our budget is, so how am I supposed to stick to it?
Yeah. And so that sort of, I think, was the catalyst for us, one, finding a different system to get us on the same page. And then that also got us talking about, okay, well, this is obviously not working. We were a couple of years into our marriage at this point. And one of the things that sort of brought us together, I think, was finally getting a dog. And it was in that same time period that we ended up getting our first dog. We sort of sat down together and said, okay, you've been talking about getting a dog for a while. We sort of put it off. It's expensive to do all the monthly expenses associated with a dog. But when I sort of came and said, what if we like budget for a dog? I think all of a sudden you got more excited about
Absolutely.
the long term stuff as well.
And it was a really powerful exercise that has applied to a much broader area of our life now in planning, for eventually adopting kids and the type of house we want to buy and all those kinds of things. It just put all of those everyday spending habits in perspective and how they actually impact the long term.
And I love the contrast of Nick is receiving text message notifications for every single purchase. And Hannah doesn't even know what the budget is. Like,
it makes me sound like a control freak. It really wasn't that way.
But it's just like you're very organized, meticulous. Yes. I'm going to make sure we don't miss any of these.
Yeah. I think he asked me, do you want to get text messages when the card is swiped? And I was like, no, absolutely not.
That sounds horrible. That is awesome. So I love how this idea of pets kind of rallied you guys together and got you on the same page of maybe budgets are useful. Because I know, Hannah, you've always been a little obsessed with little fur babies.
Yes. Like in hindsight, I think Nick looks at this and is like, I should have absolutely known that this is the way to go. So my mom, Leave It to Moms to Save Everything, has like this poster board that I had to put together of all the things that are important to me, when I was in like 6th grade. And every single image on there's like one of a family. So I had family in there. But then everything else is just an animal. It doesn't matter whether it's a fish, a horse, a dog, a ferret, whatever. It's on the board and it's important to me. So
I should have known.
I know. It's like a cheat code.
So those values were pretty clear early on for Nick to know what he was getting into. That the pets were going to be part of this budget.
Absolutely.
Was there anything that's been really helpful in just learning how to kind of make those budget decisions and create those long-term plans together? Any tools or tips that you guys have found helpful?
Yeah, I think the number one tool for us has been YNAB, or You Need a Budget. It's the budgeting tool that we went to during that Columbus, Ohio trip, and switched to from Quicken so that we could both have access to it. And what it has allowed us to do is two things. One, it's taken my budgeting style, which is this long-term approach and making sure we're planning for the things that are really important to us down the road, with also Hannah's budgeting style of making sure we're budgeting for really high quality pet food and really, for, well, this is kind of for both of us, but frisbees for our dog, right? So we take the immediate stuff and we're able to make sure we've prioritized that as well as the long term stuff. And I think ever since we got on YNAB a few years ago, it's been a total game
Yeah,
changer.
I agree.
Yeah, I think it's so important to just you have to find something and like just
Yep.
finding the thing that works with both of your personalities and your money styles to have those conversations in a way that's like happy and productive, um, and less combative.
Totally.
Yeah. The other thing that YNAB helps us do is, I think, as our values sometimes change or new values come up, we're able to add a category and just say, hey, this is important to us, so we're going to prioritize it. Just a few months ago, we've been spending a lot more time around Hannah's grandmother in Alabama. You kept taking your grandmother out for lunch, and it was cool, but it was like,
I put it in unexpected expenses because we unexpectedly wanted to go out
wanted
to
to go out to lunch.
but
And
Nick didn't like that.
I was
So,
like, hey, that's not really unexpected. But we talked about it and we said, you know what? Like, our relationship with her is really important. We want to prioritize that. So now we have a monthly category just for you guys to go out to eat and us
Yeah.
to pay for it, because that's really important.
So now that you guys are kind of on the same page about money, have a budget, you have kind of this life plan, this vision, the first thing that you set out to do was to prioritize having the ability to have more freedom and to start to travel. So what did that process look like?
so, like most people, we wanted to start traveling for all the Instagram worthy reasons that you think of. But pretty quickly, we realized that that was not going to be the real life version of traveling in an Airstream.
Pretty quickly, meaning the first day.
Yeah. Yeah. So, we hit the road and we're trying to get to our first campground. And of course, we left late. So we're getting there at
3 a.m. in the
yeah,
morning.
3 a.m. in the morning. And Nick is driving ahead of me and I'm following behind. And he flies over these train tracks. And I mean, sparks just fly out from under the Airstream. And to make this situation even better, we don't have any phone service.
Yeah.
So I'm like frantically trying to call him, like, what did you just do? Like, you just caught the whole thing on fire and we haven't even been in it hardly at all. And so I can't get him on the phone. And then when we get there, he tries to act like, what? No,
I don't know what you're
I
talking
don't know what you're talking
about.
about. Yeah.
And then it only got worse from there. So, we work remotely, so we've got to have internet access. When we show up, our first campground, we have no cell service, no anything. So we go to bed at 3 a.m. knowing we have to wake up the next morning and find a new campground immediately. The next morning we get up and we finally end up finding a spot. And there was a lot of other things that happened in here, but to sort of, decide, hey, let's go out, let's celebrate, first night. We went and got a really nice seafood dinner. And then we went to Walmart to pick up some groceries afterwards. And I process things very quickly. So at Walmart,
And by things you mean food.
food.
Yeah.
At Walmart, I was spending a lot of time in the bathroom, and Hannah was like, "Okay, like whatever, I'll get the groceries." And you were just like, "What's going on?" I was like, "I don't know. I think maybe something I ate." And we thought it probably wasn't food poisoning because
I was fine.
you were fine.
Yeah. So then we make it back to the Airstream and we're like, okay, well, Nick's got that out of his system, whatever. We open the door and our cats have had similar issues in
Yeah.
our Airstream just because they were just mad.
I think theirs was out of anger.
Yeah, they were just feeling a little angsty that we had,
Put them in the Airstream.
jostled their whole situation. So they were letting us know about it.
Yeah.
So we get all that cleaned up, are trying to figure out how we can accommodate the cats better in the Airstream. And I'm finally, like around midnight, like I have to go to bed because I was starting my first physical therapy job ever out of PT school the next day. So I get in bed, and about an hour later, I wake up with the same thing that hit Nick while we were in Walmart. And I'm just sick as a dog for like the entire rest of the night and pull it together just in time to make it to work that morning.
Yeah. And that was the first 48 hours.
Yeah. So I came home crying from work and called Nick on my way home and was like, we have just made a horrible mistake. And I don't know. People are going to think that we are just idiots when we go back on all of this. And I'll never forget, Nick was totally calm and just told me, if we still feel this way 3 months from now, it's okay. It doesn't matter what anybody thinks about it. Like, we'll step away from all of this. We'll go back. We'll find an apartment. We'll find a house. Whatever. We'll figure it out. It's not going to be as bad as you're making it out in your head.
And it didn't take us 3 months, but it did take like a full month before we really sort of, got over some of that.
Yeah, and got into a groove and really started enjoying what we were doing.
The cats were still peeing on stuff for the whole first week.
Yeah.
Just out of angst, and then I ended up with. So in an Airstream, you have gray water and black water. And gray water is the shower water and the sink water. And the black water is the other water that comes out of the toilet. And, when you're learning, you don't know what you're doing. And so I ended up with black water in my face from a toilet explosion as well during that first week. So there was a whole host of things that went wrong. But to your point, we knew that we had the financial stability and we had a budget, we had a plan that we knew we wanted to turn it all around. We could.
And I think that's such an important point and just lesson that sometimes even when we're like chasing down our dreams, even when we're like doing something that we think maybe this is crazy, but maybe it could work. Maybe this is going to give us a life a little bit more true to our values and to our purpose. Like, it can be a little messy, like,
yes.
And like a whole bunch of stuff can go wrong. And it's so easy to see those things going wrong and being like, everybody was right. This was a horrible idea. Yep. What have we done?
Yep.
But to know like that's part of the process. If we're going to learn and grow, growing requires change. And change is hard. It's just part of the deal. But it doesn't mean that you're heading in the wrong direction. But I also love that you guys had enough financial freedom. You had enough backup plans that this wouldn't be the end of the world. But I do want to talk about this. Like, it would be kind of embarrassing because I think a lot of us, we don't want to try and we don't want to risk something because we know even if it's like a 70% chance that it'll work, there's a 30% chance that it'll fail. Totally. And then everyone will see.
And I think that's been like one of the main struggles that I've had with stepping away from physical therapy. Because I didn't exactly step away to be an entrepreneur. That isn't exactly where my interests have lied. Nick's have. Nick has a very entrepreneurial spirit, whereas I've always kind of been interested in design and crafting and all of these things kind of in that realm. And so when I decided to leave physical therapy and figure out how I could fit in to help Nick with his business, not only was it stepping away from the title of physical therapist, but it was also trying to figure out where I fit in a society that really plays up the boss babe mentality, because that wasn't where I felt like my strength was. So battling through some of that and getting okay with the fact that it is okay to fail, because I've worried that I've always had design and creative things in my arsenal of something that I think that I'm kind of naturally good at and that I enjoy. But now that I'm going after that more seriously and trying to fit that into our business, feels like, oh no, what if I'm not as good at this as I thought that I was? And what if I'm not able to develop these skills the way that I want to? And everybody sees that. It's definitely been a struggle.
That can be crippling for so many of us. Like, it's easier to have a dream that is untested and untried. Because if we actually care and if we actually put ourselves out there, we'll know for certain that we don't have what it takes and we're not good enough. and a whole bunch of other people might have to know at the same exact
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
It's easier to say, well, I've just been too busy with work, or I was just too busy with my career, or like, yeah, I would always love to do that thing, but man, who can? Like, life's so
Mhm.
crazy. So it sounds like, you guys have created this life where you've been budgeting, you've been saving, you've been good with money, you've been able to make this transition into entrepreneurship. Um, but it hasn't, especially for you, Hannah, it hasn't been like a one and done. Like, I quit my job and then I had my dream job.
Exactly.
It's been a
No.
very slow process. And how has that been, just walking through that? Like, I'll try this and maybe I'll like it and maybe I won't, or maybe I'll be good at it and I'll try something else. I think so many people get stuck in that kind of that quagmire of trying to test and scale things and figure them out.
For me, and just like what I'm contributing to Mapped Out Money, the biggest part has been giving myself permission to not be the absolute best at it, and to be okay with the fact that I might do something and then look back at it a week later and go, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe that I made that. That looks horrible." And recognizing that as progress and not as like a negative thing, and learning to not be hard on myself in that. So instead of going, "Oh my gosh, that looks horrible," going, "Wow, that was just 2 weeks ago that we put that out, and I already would have done this differently because I learned this new skill that I could put into our video editing, or I learned this new program where I could make this graphic or whatever." So just really learning to slow down and take note of the progress that I'm making in the areas that I'm really interested in.
That's such a great point. Like, learning to lean in and have the reward of like, I'm learning and I'm growing and I'm testing things versus pinning all of our self-worth on the outcome.
Yes.
Because that can be a huge struggle for me. Like, oh gosh, I don't want to do something unless it's going to be awesome.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but then that means the number of things I can do is very, very tiny. There's not many
Yep.
things that I can be awesome at the very first time. What has that been like for you, Nick? And just, you were really passionate about this, and this was like, it seems like an easier fit, maybe an easier transition. But walking alongside Hannah as she's slowly trying to figure out her role and really how to best leverage her skills and her passions outside of a 9 to 5.
Yeah, so I kind of got into this, let's call it personal development world, sort of doing self awareness work a couple of years before Hannah, mostly just because you were so focused on getting through grad school.
Mhm.
And so I had a lot of free time on my hands and I started getting into this world. So by that point that we were leaving our jobs to sort of work together, I had done a lot of the, what are your strengths and how can you find work that sort of aligns with those. And so I think for us, where I was coming from was we really love Chip and Joanna Gaines, and we sort of like the way that they have built things for themselves with each other. And Chip has this great quote where he says, "Things got a lot easier in our marriage when we started pulling on the same side of the rope with each other and working together rather than against each other." So we sort of read that around the same time we were starting to work together and sort of trying to say, okay, how can we make sure we're pulling on the same rope? So I think early on for us, we both took the Strengths Finder 2.0 test and started leaning into, okay, well, what are your top 5 strengths? What are mine? And where did those fit in our overall game plan of trying to teach people about money and Mapped Out Money? And for you, all these design things you were trying to develop, one of your strengths is also a learner. They call it the learner. And that means you're really, really good at listening, taking something, learning, and acquiring new skills. Even if you don't feel that way, you are. And so for me and kind of coming together, I was like, okay, how can we sort of use Mapped Out Money to develop this design skill set that you've always wanted? And so Hannah started coming in and it was like, great, like all the video stuff we're doing for YouTube, you're the editor now. All the thumbnails, all the downloadable PDFs we're doing, you design all that now. Oh, by the way, we need a new homepage for the website. You design that now. And I think it was scary for both of us, for me to relinquish control, but that's what you have to do, and for you to step into something new. But I think that mentality of focusing on strengths is what's really helped us the most.
And Nick is so analytical that he's really good at not just seeing my strengths, but anybody's strengths, really. And believing in those, even when I don't want to believe in them myself, really. So he'll look at something that I've done and be like, you have a great eye for this. You can totally design our landing page for our website. You're totally jump in there and do it. And so that's just been really nice for him to encourage me in all of those ways, when if it was left up to me, I would probably be huddled in a corner and maybe still working as a physical therapist.
So it sounds like while it's been a hard transition to kind of find your roles and your places in this new business, and the reality is this is something we all have to figure out, whether we're going back to work, whether we're starting a new career, or even for people who are retiring. Because what's the thing that you're going to do after you don't do your 9 to 5? They're questions we all have to, and processes we all have to grapple with. But I know one of the challenges can also be not everyone gets it. Like not everyone is like super psyched and impressed that you are doing something different. What is that?
Absolutely.
What has that been like for you guys?
It's been a real struggle for me in particular, because I've always been concerned about what people think about me and just trying to get over that. And even just the other day, my cousin was introducing me to somebody and was like, oh, yeah, she lives in a trailer. And which there's nothing wrong with living in a trailer. But at the moment, we have our camper like at my grandma's house to try to help out with my grandma's situation. And as one of our other friends put it, like, oh, that must be really hard. Because when you do that, like in Alabama, like that's not like a life decision. That's like ooh, what happened that put you there where you've got to be there.
Yeah.
So we definitely have had that experience. And my grandparents, they'll introduce me to their friends and it's like, this is Hannah. She used to be a physical therapist. And it's like, yeah, I did used to be that, I guess. But, so, and you kind of just have to recognize that we're going to live a life that aligns with the values and the vision that we have. And some people are going to get it and some people aren't. And we're here for the people who get it.
Yeah.
And kind of just leave it at that, honestly.
Yeah.
Has there been any advice or any tip that you can recommend if someone is struggling with that, like changing identity, whether it's they have left their career or they're going back into the workforce or they're trying to start their own business and like, man, not everybody gets it. And sometimes even in our budgets and in our money, like you start budgeting and like a whole bunch of people don't get it. They're like, oh, wait, you're not eating lunch out every day? Are you poor? You can just get a lot of other people's assumptions get put onto your life. Anything that you guys have done to like just feel confident in, we're doing us and we're being true to ourselves and our vision?
I think one of the biggest things, and this is something that my dad like has always told me, he's like, other people are never thinking about you as much as you think that they are. So when we first left our jobs and started doing the traveling full-time thing, I would literally sit in the Airstream and out loud be talking to Nick like, oh my gosh, can you imagine what so-and-so must be thinking about us right now? And he was like, you know what? They're probably not thinking about us. And just coming to grips with that, like nobody else is thinking about me as much as I'm thinking about me. And also realizing that when I look at other people that I really admire, I don't think that they need a specific career or certain spending habits or anything else to validate them. There's always something else that I'm admiring about them, but that a lot of times I try to validate myself by how much we're spending or if we're able to keep up with everybody or what our living space looks like compared to somebody else's and all those normal things. But recognizing that I don't put those same requirements on somebody else. And so I shouldn't be putting them on myself either.
Yeah, I think maybe the biggest tip I have to piggyback off that is going back to what you said a few minutes ago, which rounds out this whole conversation around getting clear on your values and your vision, sort of what you said in the question, Jillian. For us, one thing we do is we do planning together every single quarter. Every 12 weeks, we sit down, we have a document that's called our life vision. It has bullet points of what we want every 3, 5, and 10 years. And we revisit that regularly and talk about what we want and what we're trying to create. And so when somebody else puts something on us that they think we should do or ought to do or would be better, we know that we've already defined what success looks like for us, and we sort of use that as our guidepost for the decisions that we're going to make. So, I think that's my biggest tip is to really sit down. If you're married, talk with your spouse. If you're single, talk with friends and sort of bounce ideas around them and get some clarity around where you're going. That's what's going to help you do all the stuff that we're talking about.
That's so important. And I think especially having another person that you have those conversations with, because it affirms, yeah, I'm making all these decisions and another person knows, oh, they're doing that thing because it lines up with where they want to go. And if nobody else gets it, you know that like there's at least one other person out there in the
Totally.
world who's like, oh, you're doing you. And you're making progress on your goals and your vision and your best life. And that's been so helpful for me when like everyone else is like, she seems a little crazy. Like, why in the world? Why in the world is she doing that? Like, I can text the one person who knows why I'm doing that
Yep.
thing, and they'll cheer me on. Oh my gosh, thank you so much, Nick and Hannah, for being here. And for all my listeners, head over to Mapped Out Money Podcast, subscribe to their channel, start listening, because especially if you're a couple or if you're younger or you just want to be awesome at money so you can be awesome at life, it would be great to have a little bit more of them, Nick and Hannah, in your life. Because I think Nick and Hannah are just an incredible example of the fact that we don't have to be perfect. We just have to go out and be a little bit more courageous every day because adventure awaits.